Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to be here again, together with Valentin, our senior backend developer. Hi, everyone. Today we're excited to show you a little bit on AI helping us within the existing code base. There's always this discussion that AI is going to replace engineers. Here at Netguru, we actually believe that it's going to enhance our work. We are using it as a help in our projects, but always with human eye on it to be able to spot some inefficiencies, maybe do some job that we don't want to do, that can be easily done using some sophisticated algorithm models and so on. And today we're gonna work on one particular tool, which is the GPT-engineer, and we're gonna show you how working on a live code base, we can do some enhancements to the code, but also maybe get it to help us with testing, which I'm excited really about because my background is in QA. So without further ado, I'm handing over to Valentin, who's going to walk you through all the things. As we move on, please do ask questions live. We're going to be spotting them. Probably they're going to be relevant to what's happening on the screen. So please feel free to ask them along the way. Do not wait for the very last second, and we will try to answer all your doubts. And yeah, so let's move on. Valentin, please go ahead. Exciting things ahead.
Hi everyone. First of all, and thanks for attending. Thanks for the nice introduction, Lukasz. And as you said, I mean, if I look really short in what's the purpose of what we are intending to do today, it's exactly like you said. We want to see a bit more in detail how we can leverage GPT-engineer, and not exactly or precise only GPT-engineer, because it's, I would say, it's just a choice. We could easily choose any other tool. And the first clarification would be that the fact that plus minus, I would say, all the other tools, at least what we tested in this moment, kind of behave in the same manner. Some things are common, some things are not between tools. It's just I would say, it's not a preference in the end. It's just the tool that I played with the most recently, let's say. And leaving words aside, let me share the screen, because I know we planned an hour, but I will try to be really concise and really focused on the code. So I promise I will won't bore you like more than 30 minutes. And as Lukasz said, please feel free to leave the questions in the chat, because we will have, let's say, moments when we will just need to wait for GPT-engineer to do its stuff, to generate code. So that's the proper moment to be able to answer your questions as good as we can. And let me see if you can see my screen. Lukasz, can you please confirm me when it's visible?
It is visible already, I believe so. You can go ahead.
Perfect. Last drop of a coffee, and let's see. So I won't bore you with the details on how we can install GPT-engineer. I will just spend 1 minute here, I promise, and that's it. This is the main repo of GPT-engineer. The installation, it's, I would say, quite straightforward, but from time to time, they are changing things, doing upgrades and so on. And sometimes, even recently, things that worked for me, let's say 1 or 2 months ago, didn't work, and I had to do a clean refresh. One good recommendation from my side would be, whenever you have issues with things that already worked in GPT-engineer and you are running it locally, don't spend time in trying to fix things. Just do a clear or a quick refresh reinstallation, and it should solve your issues. I did that a couple of times, spent times when things were broke on the repo, and then just a clean install worked for me. So when it comes, and I want to highlight, as I said, 1 or 2 things which are important, and then we will go to our code. GPT-engineer can be used in 2 modes when it comes to what we want to do with it. We can generate fresh code like we showed in our previous session, or we can try to enhance existing code. You have all the guidance that you need when it comes to the installation, but also a high level, let's say, differentiation between them. The thing which is really important in this moment for us is the flag I, which let's say it's highlighting for us the fact that we want to enhance our existing code. That being said, let's go to the code directly. I have two repositories that you will see today from my side. Is the GPT-engineer, and then we have another repository which I called blog REST API. It's a public available repository. If you want the link, just drop us a sign and we will share the link with you. Also the code if you are interested in it, but as I said, it's a publicly available repository. I will walk you just a bit through what we have here in the repository and why we picked this specific repository. It's first of all, it's a Java-based repository with Spring Boot. I picked it. I'm guilty here. It's I would say a preference, a personal choice, as I'm familiar, or my background it's coming from the JVM, or it's mapped around the JVM, like Kotlin, Java, Scala, and so on. And the other second reason, I try to find a repository or a project, to be more precise, which is not the most complex one, but on the other way around, it's also not the most simplest one. And obviously, it has things specific to Spring. Most of the things that we are discussing as today are valid for most of the other languages, and I will try to do the separation between them when things are different, at least comparing with the languages that I had the chance to test. So when it comes to structures, I said I will walk you just a bit through it. It's a kind of a Java Spring specific structure. So for the people that are familiar with Java and Spring, it will be a really, really common thing that I'm saying today. I have, when it comes to high level structure, I have the common controller, I have the common service, I have the common repository. The controller, and let me open the post controller because today we will mainly focus our discussion on posts. So as I said, from business perspective, and as the name is implying, we are discussing about a blog post related API. So we have some APIs which are used in order to serve blog specific things. So as you can see here, we have categories controller, comments controller, post controller. So it means that for each and every of those entities, we have different REST endpoints which are serving functionality to a front end. And this is the API, the entry point of our application. Then we have the service, and I will also open one of those and we will get into details in a second. The service is, as the name implies, the place where we keep our business logic. We will see in a second what exactly we keep there. And when it comes to what else we have today, we have repositories, and also those are our way to interact with the database. I'm using, at least for this application, an in-memory database. But obviously the code that will be generated, it will be the same for any other database. Spring has a nice integration and a nice way to abstract the integration with the database. Those are the three main layers. So the controller, the entrance to my application, the service where we keep the logic, the repository, the interaction with the database, which is really abstracted, to be honest. The person which wrote actually this repository didn't involve a lot of work here, because Spring helps us generate a lot of things behind the scenes for us. Obviously, I have, and you can see already that I have different other packages, and I will just walk really quick through them. Security config, where we keep the security configuration of our application. Then we have also some JWT, JSON of token specific configuration. Here I won't enter into the details because we won't focus on those today, at least, depending on the time. Utils, and then we also have some payloads where we keep the model. That's the high level structure of our project in this moment. When it comes to testing, we don't have much. Actually, we don't have nothing, I would say. It's just the dummy skeleton that we have at the beginning. And as Lukasz said, we will have the chance to see how GPT-engineer is performing when it comes to testing. That's kind of it. And what you can see here, I have 3 different prompts. We will start with the 1, 2, and 3, which we prepared today. Obviously, we can change them. We can even, depending on the time, we can add an additional one. We will see how we'll be with the time in the end. Okay, that's the main repository. And now, how we link the GPT-engineer repository with the repository that I have in this moment. So as I said, I have GPT-engineer installed locally. I installed it using Poetry, so it's one of the easiest way to do it and is the recommended way also on their site. You just need to do a Poetry install and you will have everything locally. Yeah, you may have issues when installing Poetry itself, but that's another discussion for another topic. I would say. So I have it installed with Poetry, and you also have my you see my environment here, which is created. The command that you will see me running a lot today is this command. Lately, but not much time ago, they changed a bit the command from GPT-engineer to this new one. It's not that important, but just as a recommendation, they are also mentioning it on the site. Use this one because they have some extra fancy stuff and enhancement behind the scenes prepared for you when you are running it with GPT-E and not with GPT-engineer, the classical way to run it. I have Azure here as a flag because I am pointing to one of our models installed on the cloud. This is our basic URL. And then here you can see I'm pointing to my repository, which is this one, blog REST API, and mentioning as a deployment GPT-4. It's a deployment obviously installed in our cloud. And the important flag that I mentioned at the beginning, it's I, which means we let GPT-engineer know that we want to enhance code and we don't want to create code from scratch like we did in our previous session. I will run this command in a second, or actually I will already run it, but 10 seconds. This is to do a change here. These are the prompts that we will run today. The fourth one, and I just need to leave it like this. And this is the first prompt. I will start the GPT generation code and then I will show you in a second. And also please notice the changes that I have here. In this moment, I have the 3 prompts. In a second or in a couple of minutes, we will have the first code generation that we will obtain after running GPT-engineer. The first thing that GPT will ask us is to pick the files that it will analyze and based on which it will try to enhance our code. And we can do this via File Explorer or we can do this command line. Doesn't matter for me as a developer, I always prefer to use the command line, so I will pick the second choice. And then this part, it's quite important. And it's important mainly because it's actually the map that GPT-engineer is doing for us once it's going to our API. So we can see here actually all the files that we have inside our project. And what's GPT asking me in this moment is, please define for me a scope that I will use in order to follow the instructions that you gave me on the prompt. And obviously I have an option to say all, for example, here, and I just want to, let's say, start the demo with an error, like any nice demo. And why it is an error and why I wanted to show you, because this is a common thing that you will find when running or trying to use GPT-engineer on larger projects with a lot of files. And this is happening, I mean, it's not the most intuitive message. They have an open issue and they promise they will enhance it. It's just saying to us that something is wrong with the encoding with the UTF-8 codec. And this is mainly due to the fact that inside the API that we have a lot of files, and some of them, like APIs and also some strange properties, let's say, they are not UTF encoded. What you will do here, it's actually what the best practice recommends in the end, is just not leave all the files to GPT-engineer, be as precise as possible when it comes to the scope of what GPT-engineer will use. On the other way around, pay attention not to give him too less, but I will discuss in a second about that. What I need to do before rerunning my command, it's actually going in my repository, and you can already see here that GPT created a meta file for me, and it's located here, and it's a meta file with all the classes that it's trying to scan and the classes that actually generated the error. Easiest things to do, it's obviously simply deleted. You can also simply leave it there and, let's say, exclude some of the files that were used, but the easiest way to simply delete it if you want to start from scratch, doing this again, and then I'm always also choosing to pick the files via the terminal command, and from here I already know the indexes, but just to show you what are the classes that will be scanned, I want to start scanning actually everything which is in my src main Java, and I want to go until, let's say, 53, which are my application properties, because I know that in tests I don't have nothing yet, and I know that target is not important, target being the folder where all the after build files are placed, so we don't have an interest in those files. So there are many ways to, or actually it's a small DSL in which we can mention the files that we choose, but in our case is, so I said 7 if I recall well, and then we want to go until 53. That's our area of selection, and obviously you can do combination. I mean, if you want to go from 7 to 53 and then, for example, skip those between 53 and 63, then you can simply put a comma and then mention the other interval or range that you want to tackle. Here is the moment, and you can also have, here's the moment when GPT-engineer is starting to generate the files and generate things for us. We will see, as it has a lock on my folder, we will see everything that is generating at the end. What it's already generating, it's again the file is that I showed, only with the range that we mentioned. And obviously, I can also enable to have real-time logs here. I didn't went to with that option as I want to optimize a bit the resources on my station. Now it should take like 1 minute maximum until we will have all the files generated, at least for the first one. And then obviously I forgot what it's doing actually. So what I told GPT-engineer to do is the following. I said, add a dedicated REST endpoint that will be used to update a particular post in the database. So when it comes to the controller that I showed you at the beginning, this one, I said we want to add a dedicated endpoint in this moment to update the posts. And if you can see here, I have only, and I have indeed a lot of documentation because I have the Swagger specification here, but in this moment, I have an endpoint to create a post. I have an endpoint to retrieve all the posts. I have an endpoint to retrieve by ID a certain post, and then at the end, I have just an experimental post by category, which is actually doing the linking between a post and a category. And I asked GPT-engineer to add 2 endpoints. I want an endpoint, a REST endpoint, to be used for updating a particular post in the database, obviously based on an identifier, and then a dedicated REST endpoint that will be used to delete certain post in our database. And I mentioned here, add proper logic at controller level, service level, and repository level. This is a fine line whenever we are using AI tools. And why I'm saying it's a fine line in the level of details that we mentioned in a prompt. Obviously, as much details we have and as more specific that we are, it's better. And the other way around is if we are too specific with certain things and GPT-engineer is not capable to do those things for us because they're too specific, we will need to rerun it. In our case, it's nothing fancy because what I'm asking, at least looking to the Java Spring world, it's a really, really basic thing. So I want an endpoint added to my interface. I want some dummy logic inside my service, and then I want to leverage my repository to be able to offer to the user the functionality to update the post. And in this moment, it should already be generated for us. It's asking me if I want to execute the code. I will say no for a moment, and then we'll have the standard question that GPT is asking us. If the code is run, it's actually used for analytics at their side. I will say yes and yes here, and then I will also see the cost that GPT is generating for us. And let's see what it generated for us. Because one thing that I can already mention is the fact is not always the most deterministic tool. You can run it in the same circumstances twice, and you may end up with different things generated. You may have ways to train a model and be more precise when generating tools, but normally if you don't have a really well-trained model and if you go out of the box with certain requirements for the first time, you will end up with different things. Let's see. For example, one of the common things that it's doing is, even if I explicitly said to just add an extra functionality for us, it's simply removing me the entire content of the file. And that's a common thing encountered in GPT-engineer, in AutoGPT, MetaGPT also. It's not always appending properly. We can be more precise in the prompt, like explicitly saying append, but even then sometimes it's simply deleting what it had and trying to add code, the new code, and that's it. So it's not appending, it's overwriting. Before entering in what it generated, I want to show you a file which is important. This file, which is improve.txt, is the file where it's showing to us, and it can also be displayed in the console. It's showing to us what is the logical thinking that GPT-engineer is using behind the scenes. So we can see here that it's trying to add functionality in our post controller class, and it's trying to add a put mapping method and the delete mapping method. It needs also to add functionality to our post service, and it's also going to add functionality to post service implement. This one is an interface in technical terms, and this one is actually the implementation of that interface. And the output, it's actually showing to us what it's adding in each class in this moment. And we can see, and we can even try to start and copy paste all the code that it generated for us. Now let's go here. One other common thing that you will encounter, and you see it here because I played a bit with the project and settings before our webinar, is the separators. Sometimes you will see files that GPT just parsed, and you will see them as being different just because GPT-engineer is using different line separators. This one can obviously be skipped really easy and is depending on the operating system. Even IDEA has ways to simply skip it. And what we can do, if you can see here, I can bet, and you need to believe me that this one is just generated and not needed. The repository also, you can see, is not needed. And what we are actually interested is the service, the post service implementation, and the controller. So this one, until here. And also this one is not of interest for us. And as I said, I just wanted to show you that depending on the line separators, the parser will simply parse them and use different line separators. When it comes to the functionality generated, if I open the controller, you will see in this moment something really strange. And this is not something that is generated all the time. If I run it 2 or 3 times, you can see that it's simply adding or appending this functionality that you can see here directly to the file. Sometimes it's not doing that. It's simply overwriting everything on the file with the same exact prompt. What I will do, just to make sure the code is okay, I copy pasted what I have here, and I will simply do the following. I will do a rollback on this, on directly the controller, and going at the end, I will simply do this. And this is the code that generated for us. And we need to do the same also for the service and also for the implementation of the service. When it comes to the service, it's actually the same thing. And it's actually, and I will show you at the end because I'm looking to the time and I already went a bit further than I should. You can even enforce it in the code directly to simply say, I want to have in the code of GPT-engineer, I want to have an append and not an override. They say that they will improve. The community says that they will improve this functionality, but sometimes, as I said, it's doing what exactly we have in this moment. And then for the service, doing the same exact thing. And I know you will say, to do this, you need to have technical skills. And I totally agree in these scenarios. And also the purpose of our webinar today is to show limitations that GPT-engineer in this moment, and not only GPT-engineer, because as I said, this is a common thing encountered in also other languages. And what I will do is actually take the code and simply paste it to the initial. Okay, do it from here, paste it to the initial implementation. As you saw at the beginning, I already have in the comment file everything. So I can simply take that file and simply copy paste it also from there. Let me paste it at the end, and that should be it. In this moment, if you look to the 3 classes in which I'm interested, we should see no errors. And I'm seeing in this moment that I have 2 methods, which I added here. And now you can also see it here. I have in the controller, I have the delete, and actually I'm seeing, yeah, that's a nice thing because the update wasn't generated for us. It's an interesting thing. I have the delete for the moment. I have the mapping, and one thing which is interesting, I do have out-of-the-box authorization. And I'm saying out of the box, which is not actually out of the box, because if you look to the controller itself, all the other endpoints that we have previously, they have pre-authorization on the endpoints. GPT-engineer knew that I have pre-authorization and also added to my endpoints. If it wouldn't add it, I can simply, obviously, write in a prompt, please also add me authorization for it, and it will be done out of the box. Then I have the service with my implementation, which will take me to the newly added method in the post service. And if I want to go here, I will also see a really, really simple implementation. And it's simply going to the repository and finding by ID. I don't see anything in the repository itself because, as I said, Spring, and to be more precise, Spring Data GPA has a nice way to abstract our interaction towards the database, and it's already generating out of the box for us all the common methods that we need behind the scenes. If you look here, you will notice the fact that I should, at least in the implementation, I think I saw it, I also have the update post functionality. So it generated for me the functionality in the service, and it's leveraging the repository, but wasn't able to generate for us also the method in the controller. These things are common things and they happen, and these are limitations in this moment of GPT-engineer, and I said other tools. That's the first part and the first prompt. We will go a bit faster with the other tools, with the other prompts. Now, if you have questions towards me related to what I did.
There was an interesting question from the audience about following the configuration for prettier or linting config. So if you have anything over there, would GPT-engineer follow that, or you need to very precisely prompt it also in the
You need to
instruction?
really, and I played a bit with that, and to be honest, I wanted to showcase you that, but sometimes it's working, sometimes it's not. So even, and that's the reason why I didn't want it to showcase it, because I would have been forced to run it a lot of times to show it's working. You can be really precise in the prompt, specify the lint configuration or any other formatting configuration, but it's not working all the times. And when I'm saying it's not working all the times, it's not working for all the code that you have. And obviously, one more important thing that it's good to be mentioned is, in the scenarios similar with the one that we had here, the fact that it overwrote all that I have in a file, obviously lint configuration or any prettifier configuration that I would have, it would be impacted when I would simply copy paste it back. Okay, if no other questions are there, let me do a switch. So I will do just a really quick commit, and I will say, let's say adding new functionality. And I will tell you in a second why I'm doing this. And you could ask me why you just don't leave it there in the prompt. I'm not doing that because we will use the same base code to also add testing and functionality. And I think, Lukasz, here you for sure have a question at the beginning. And when we do that, there is the risk that some of the code that we wrote explicitly here, it may be changed even if we don't explicitly link the functionality to it. So what I'm saying in this moment is, if I say wrote some tests for this functionality, it will also look to the existing functionality, and sometimes it's a bad thing and it's 1% of the cases, but sometimes it's also modifying for me the code. And that's actually one of the things that I don't like at all for GPT-engineer. If I'm really precise when saying, please write me code for this portion of code, and if I'm precise saying that I want those unit tests or those integration tests in a dedicated file, I would expect that the code will simply remain the same, and it's not always happening. That's why I simply committed and pushed what we have, so we are safe with the existing functionality.
I suppose it
And
happens because when you will ask GPT-engineer to help you with tests, right? It will, well, showing which files he needs to analyze, he would need to analyze all those things as well, right? So the controllers,
yeah,
services, and stuff.
for
And
sure, it's
while
exactly
analyzing them, probably he tries to do some refactoring on the way.
it's exactly what what you are saying, Lukasz. Because you will see in a second when I will trigger, and let me do that because I know it will take some time for the tests to be generated. I'm running the same command, and I will get in a second back to the idea. Second time I'm running it, I'm using a different prompt, and I will show you in a second. Important thing is, GPT is saying to me, the scope that you mentioned for me to be analyzed at the beginning, it's already saved. If you want another scope when it comes to the files that I should take into account before generating you any portion of code, just go and modify them in the file list.txt. So if I would want another scope for my tests, I would just have to go here and either edit the files, either restrict it, either simply delete it, and it will ask me to pick any of those files. And now I will simply leave it here to do its job, going to the prompt and coming back to the idea, what we want from GPT in this moment. And let me also close this prompt. We simply want to create for us unit tests, and I was really explicit here saying I want to have unit tests for post-service implementation Java class. And I'm really precise in saying I want to have unit tests for all the methods inside the post-service implementation class. And I also do mention here the fact that I want as many unit test scenarios covered as possible, both happy and unhappy, and also to use data randomization. And coming back to what you said, Lukasz, it's exactly what you said. In order to generate unit tests, it's obviously passing through the files that I mentioned at the beginning when I picked a certain scope when it comes to the file covered. And the idea behind is if it finds a portion of code, it tries to refactor it so that it's easier to test, which from a developer perspective, it's not a really bad thing, I would say. But I would, if you would ask me, and again, it's a personal opinion, I would put it as an optional flag there. So if you want to generate tests, and while generating tests or writing tests, you discover something wrong with my method, because that's a common, let's say, best practice when writing tests. If you discover as a developer that it's hard to cover some portion of code with unit tests, it means something is smelly in your code for sure. So the reasoning behind the scenes of GPT-engineer, it's based on a best practice, but on the other way around, I would say it should be a flag and not just starting to refactor all the code.
Did you try playing with it in a way that it's all included in one prompt, because you have different prompt files for different
Yes.
parts of today's presentation? But what happens if you put it all the way in the same file, like generate me the new API, then create tests for that, then this and that? Would it work better this way, or it would still try to mingle
It's
around a little bit?
it's working better, and it's like you read my mind, Lukasz, in this moment. It's working better because you do it in one shot. You are saying to GPT-engineer, generate this functionality for me, write unit tests for this functionality, write, let's say, Spring integration test for this functionality. So it's doing it in one shot. But I don't think that's the case for all the functionalities that we have. Let's say I'm working as an engineer on a project. I'm just onboarding on the new project. I'm a new colleague. I'm coming to the team, and my first task is to enhance the tests. So I already have the code which was written, but I want to increase the test coverage. It means I'm not actually writing code in the same time and then testing it again, or the other way around. I mean, I don't imagine actually a scenario where I would just write code without unit tests, but let's say you want to do it separately. And in this moment, GPT-engineer is not providing a clear separation between those. But again, it's not always happening this. I just pushed the files just to make sure everything is okay. And let's see
There's
now,
also, before you move forward,
please.
there's also an interesting question, because what we are showing is the technical part of the solution, let's say, but then there's the logic part also. So, what if you would try to use it to apply logic when asking about functionality? The question mentions, let's say I wanted to create a function that will calculate best time to visit a country based on temperature, ticket prices, and so on. So I guess here in blog post scenario, it would be something like, please, I don't know, filter out some blog posts based on criteria and so on, or stuff like that. Would it be capable of also understanding the logic based on existing code base?
Yes and no. For me, it's more a no than a yes. I tried it, but unfortunately, I cannot share that part. It's exactly what you said at the beginning. It's we have an NDA for it. I had a project, and having this model internally for us deployed in our Azure model, I can use, let's say, I can use it with no issues when it comes to GDPR, but I cannot show it here. And it was a really, really specific statistical rule which was simply aggregating some data, and from that data normalize the data and obtaining and, let's say, filtering the data in a nicer form. It generated something for me, it generated suggestions, but in this moment is not capable to add really precise extra logic when you focus it to a certain business case scenario. I mean, if you say to GPT engineer, just go look to those 5 lines and try to improve them, refactor them, it's really okay. And it's mainly the same with all the AI tools. But if you have really, really complex logic in those lines and you say, try to extend me that functionality, there is a big, big chance that you will get something. It may be something better than it was previously with some added functionality, but 99%, almost 100% of the cases, you need a developer to validate the logic for you. And you need a developer also when it comes to the way GPT engineer is doing testing.
Yeah, my testing mind comes like to this because I'm thinking, about scenarios when we are fixing some bugs reported, and then adjusting one place. You need to remember about all the dependencies and everything, and it's easy to forget to actually update some certain parts. I guess, maybe GPT engineer is not a good case for that, but I'm thinking about some other tools that would be, that would come handy to show us, okay, while you are actually editing this particular part, please remember that this is used here and there, and there's also underlying logic over there. So kind of draw us a map where we should actually look at, just not to miss anything or not to break anything that was already working.
Yeah, that's a really interesting scenario, uh, in the sense that from my experience, from my practice with GPT engineer and also with AutoGPT, because I also played a bit with it, the code that it generated by the tools, it's better once we give it more context, and it's kind of somehow logical to be like that. I mean, if I use GPT engineer for a project day by day, I'm using it maybe from the beginning, or I only had a few code and GPT engineer helped me enhance the code, and I'm always, let's say, keeping a model, keeping track of the things that I asked GPT engineer to do for me. The code that it generates is better, and it's also capable of keeping in mind places that was changed, ensuring regression tests and so on. The only thing, and I will do also a rollback from the same reason that I said with the separators, not to change the configuration now because we are interested just in this file. But concluding the idea, you anyway, from my perspective, and at least in this moment, you need to double check that logic. I mean, you can try to use it day by day, give it a bit more context, enhance the model, keep that data up there, and keeping all the way. And the code, 99%, it will be better, and you will be amazed by the fact that it remembered something that you said in a prompt like 1 month ago, and you see it in the code reflected, and you remember about it, but still you need to double check it.
Yeah, it was
This
actually the thing.
is
This is the exact thing I was wondering when you showed this third line. Like, please remember about controller, about this and that. I was about to ask if it's gonna remember to actually, while you're asking for a new service, to also include those new API that to include those. And you say that it learns on the go, right? It remembers
it
what.
learns on the for sure it learns on the go, Lukasz. But also the thing, and one of the most important things in the end, is the fact that you don't have guarantee if you run it 2 times that it will happen. So first time when I run it, those 3 prompts on this specific repository, the first time it generated me perfectly in the controller, just appended everything there. And that's, let's say, the biggest or the most concrete argument that GPT engineer is capable of doing it, and for sure will end up in doing that and learning from what you say, because it did it at the beginning for me. The probability that one thing that you mentioned in the prompt in the past, didn't happen, you corrected and you save that information on a model, on a dedicated model, the probability to happen again, it's decreasing directly proportional with the number of times you are using certain task with GPT-engineer. What I'm doing here, I'm adding the class, and let's have a look to what it generated for me. So in this moment, this is the class with tests that is generated for me, and it's indeed post-service implementation in this moment. This is a missing package that normally it should have been imported directly, but idea it's smart enough for me to just mention it and add it there. It should have been added at the beginning. But as you can see, in this moment, this class, at least from compilation perspective, doesn't have any errors. I can see in this moment that I have mocked all the repositories that normally are used by post-service implementation. And then when it comes to the setup, and this is the part which gets better once you use it and use it while writing tests. You can see here that I have some dummy data which was generated by GPT-engineer. There are some other models and plugins that you can use in order to also have data specific to your domain, and then your data it's really targeting your features when it comes to your domain, and you don't have simply test post like you see here, but you have a really more meaningful information when it comes to your data specificity. And what you can see, it wrote for me just 2 tests in this moment. Or actually targeting a class, if we open it in this moment with at least 5 methods that we have in this moment, because we have the for CRUD and then we have the get all posts. In this moment, it generated 2 tests. If I say to him, enhance and add dedicated tests also for the scenarios which are not covered in this moment, it will add it. But pay attention, because what it's doing actually, some of the scenarios in the methods are tested via those two tests, in the sense that it's doing a find by ID and then it's also doing a create post, and also the sets that I have at the end, it's get title, description, count, and it's generating for me all the logic that I need in order to be able to do the assertion. If I try to run it, most probably it won't work and we will need to debug it. But let's see. So it's actually went okay. Okay. I was in under the confusion that it's an integration test, and then we need to tweak it a bit when it comes to running it itself. It's a unit test in this moment, and it should be the same exact thing also for the other test that I run. So it's actually running completely, and let me see if the plugin is configured, because I should be able to run it. Yeah, I can run all the class entirely and it's running it for me. And one last thing here, looking also to the time, because we have another prompt, is the fact that imagine that in this moment I told in the prompt, and let me just start the other prompt, rename this one just to gain some time, and I will come back in a second. So this is the second scenario, just going here and rename this one to be the main prompt, refactor it, coming here just to gain some time. Okay. And what it's saying to me, blog post prompt 3. Yeah, I did something wrong. Yes, the second. So I have here prompt 1, 2, 3, and it's saying in ask files. Let me see. Edit. Yeah, let's do the following. I know from where it is. I can do the following because the last prompt is not related to any of the tests that we run, and I can simply do this. And let's see, it should ask me again the scope. Okay, second scope, and somewhere like this. Let's see. Frozen code. Yeah, it's exactly what you said, what I said, because it generated for us. Let me do this, roll back really quick, and let me do the following, another cleanup here to just ask me from the beginning, and this time I will also pay attention to the map that it gives me. I want to use terminal, and what I want to generate in this moment is maybe because of the ignore file that I have, and it's generated for me some files. Let's say I'm interested in generating or having the scope from 11, because this is Java. Is the same error that I was mentioning at the beginning. And let's say I want to end up at 48, and I want 10, 48. And because this is the main core of my application with the main functionality, and what I did, I have a git ignore file, which is not the most exact one in this moment. And when it's generating things for me, it may drop in my scope, like from 7 until 53, a file where I didn't have the UTF-8 encoding. So I had to remove it. So that's why I, let's say, decreased the scope, because we don't have time now to debug what is the exact file there. Coming, because now it should generate for us, and I will show you in a second what's the prompt. Coming back to the idea that I wanted to highlight when it comes to unit testing. I just said in the prompt directly, because this is the prompt, to create unit tests for me for the post-service implementation. That's just one class of my code. If I would have, or if I would wrote, let's say, 5 classes today, and I want to generate the test for all of them, GPT-engineer will do that. I didn't do it because it would take, let's say, multiplied X time by the number of classes that I have in this moment, and also it's translated in some money in the end, because it's using tokens from the OpenAI model. But what I wanted to show you is, if I would have a project with 10 classes, I will just be able to run all the tests, and yeah, I may end up in not having covered all the scenarios, but at least I will get, from the last time I tried it, I got 55% coverage for a project where I simply removed all the tests. So I dropped all the unit tests from a project and simply said to GPT-engineer, generate unit tests for all the project. And it got to me to a 55%, which is not bad. It's not the best way to do it. For sure, it can be improved. Now, if you have questions until it will generate for us, and what will generate for us, the last prompt, I said, create Spring integration tests covering the scenarios defined inside post controller. So I just want to be able to test from the controller, directly targeting the controller, the service, the repository, and all the logic behind the controller. That's why why it's called Spring integration tests. And indeed, it's a bit specific to Spring, because it's leveraging Spring support in order to generate the code. And it's already done. The standard questions. And you can see here, it costs us $1.02 in this moment to generate the code, which I would say it's not much, but for sure, if you have a big code, you will end up in having a lot of tests. And in this moment, this is the test that was generated for us. And I close this from obvious reasons. What I said at the beginning is the line separators. You just need to switch it from the project settings, but I want to showcase it for you. These are the tests generated back, and this is what I asked GPT-engineer to create in this moment. Let me also do this, add it to see it here. And what it did for us, and you can see it here, it's also using transactional, which in this moment is not part of my project, and it should have directly imported it as a dependency, but this time it didn't do it. And you can see why this annotation is not visible. And you can see here that it's doing a setup for me for a Pojo, and you can see that in this moment it's directly targeting my APIs. It's targeting what I'm exposing from the controller directly, and it's using and leveraging the post DTO which was set up in the beginning. So I'm capable of targeting directly my APIs, leveraging obviously Spring support. And we can see that we have, so the setup doesn't count. I have one scenario, two scenarios, three scenarios, four, five scenarios which are mentioned, and it's always saying additional tests and other scenarios can be added similarly. If I go now and ask GPT-engineer, please do add those test scenarios for me, it will add it directly for me. It didn't add it because added it for me. It's an optimization that sometimes is doing in the sense that it's first trying to get an input from the user itself, from the developer that it's using the code, saying, okay, what I generated for you, it's okay. Give me an yes for me to continue and generate something more. And as I said, the only thing that we need to do is just import the transactional, and the tests should run in this moment. Looking a bit to the time, we have 3 minutes more for questions, curiosities.
I have a question actually. So, is there a prompting guide from GPT engineering creators as to the wording you should use? Because, for example, you asked it specifically when generating tests, you asked it to include happy and unhappy scenarios. Someone can call it positive, negative scenarios. Like there can be different like wording used to name the same things. Are they recommending anything to be used, or is it like it's trying to interpret it somehow?
That's actually one of the best questions that someone can ask when it comes to AI tools. Why I'm saying, at least from my perspective, why I'm saying that, as you notice today, and if you decide to play with any tool, not directly GPT-engineer, this is valid for all the tools that you may encounter. One of the most important things is the way you express the requests. And as you noticed also, Lukasz, if I place there create, or if I place there add, or if I place there append, GPT-engineer and any other AI tool, it may interpret it differently. From tool to tool, and also GPT-engineer have some, I would say, guidance, not really specific documentation, but there are also dedicated AI tools which do specialize in this exact thing, to make your prompt as efficient as possible. So are at least 2 or 3 solutions that you can use directly, going and, let's say, coupling to your day-by-day code and saying, please rephrase this prompt for me to be more precise. Because indeed, the way you write the prompt is at least 20-30% influencing the outcome. And I'm saying this from my own experience. I saw that running in the same conditions, the same prompt, 2 or 3 times, different prompts 2 or 3 times, I ended up in having either what I expected and even more, or either not even 10% of what I
A bit less, yeah.
was expecting.
Yeah, right. So I guess it's a great nudge towards the tool creators that it's useful to have a guide to at least show you what can you use for your prompts to be more precise and to generate more the outcomes that you are actually expecting, right? Not so
Yeah,
long. I think it was just days ago, or even if I remember well, when OpenAI they issued their prompting guides to so that people can use it, right? So I guess it's a useful thing.
yeah, it's for sure a useful thing, because you you as a developer, if you ask me, you are focused on obtaining something. I want a functionality to be extended. I want to have some tests. You are focused on the end result. You shouldn't focus as a developer in refining your words so that the tool is as efficient as possible. For me, as an engineer, I care about the end outcome. I care about my code to be nicely done, to be test covered. I shouldn't, let's say, try to every time pick my words, because that's time
Right.
consuming, if you ask me.
Right. But it's the same thing we encounter in everyday interactions, right? After all, most of the problems that we get in the projects, they are actually coming from misunderstandings, right? That someone
Yeah,
said
that's
something and the
exactly.
other person understood it differently, and then voila, we have it again with the AI tooling around it. So I guess somehow we can say it simulates human behavior in this particular area. Let's say
I
that
mean,
it
in the
can
end, human.
misunderstand us, right?
I mean, in the end, humans created those tools, and it's like,
Yeah.
let's say, inheritance. It's like leaving out to your childrens and so on. Leaving some parts of you is normal to be like that.
Right. All right, cool, great. I don't see any other questions from the audience. I guess if you're curious to know more, feel free to approach us to comment under this video. Thank you, Valentin, for this today's session. Very informative. Pretty nice. It would be awesome to see how those tools develop, what comes further, how they're gonna tackle this part about being non-deterministic, that somehow you can get, with the exact same prompt you get slightly different response. I'm curious to see how this thing changes in future, hopefully for the best of us, and at some point it helps even better, and you don't have to pick your words that carefully
Uh,
to be able to to move forward quickly.
I was hearing as a closing line, let's say from my side, Lukasz, I was hearing, I think this week or the previous week, that in GPT-4 or 3.5, so even the previous version, in this moment, they are simulating like 160 in terms of IQ. So is the Einstein IQ, I would say, in this moment. And it expects that for the next version, it will increase way more. So I would say that's the future. And in the end, is not like we are promoting AI and we are the only ones in the world trying to do that. We try to, let's say, enhance our lives as engineers, also as testers, let's say, remembering a bit about your past, but even as I'm seeing it used everywhere in the companies, like refining different proposals to the client, refining different stories, creating automatic stories, and so on. From my perspective, that's the future. Is not there to replace us, is there to help us improve the quality of our delivery.
Exactly. I guess we should all get used to it, that it's our new normal.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Thanks a lot for today's presentation. Thank you all who joined us. Thank you all who will be watching this post live. I hope you got inspired. You will try to experiment. We encourage you a lot to experiment with those tools, and enhance your code, and yeah, make your life easier and better while creating solutions. Have a good day or good night, depending on which time zone you're watching us from, and see you on our next webinars.
Thank you, Lukasz. Thanks everyone for attending,
Goodbye,
and
everyone.
happy holidays. Let's say now that we are close.
Exactly. Happy Christmas for those of you who are celebrating those. Enjoys this festive season.
See you,
Bye.
Lukasz. Bye, everyone.